between the time when the oceans drank Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of. And unto this, Conan, destined to wear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia upon a troubled brow. It is I, his chronicler, who alone can tell thee of his saga. Let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
Bam, 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 We're talking about the last Conan man. It killed James Earl Jones, who claimed to be his dad. He
Generic adventure songs.
I know that one was in it as well.
All right, then. I think that about concludes the intro.
That's the soundtrack. That's the opening feature for the movie Conan.
I think Basil Polidoris would be proud of our rendition of his score.
It's off to a strong start, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Well,
I wonder what film we're talking about today.
Yes, hello everybody, welcome to Mustard Movie Night.
Hello, Internet.
Which film are we talking about tonight?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Matt. Tonight we are talking about Conan the Barbarian.
Conan!
That's right. And of course, if you haven't guessed it already, it's the Arnold Schwarzenegger version, not the Jason Momoa version.
I'm sure the Jason Momoa version has its merits.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
I
it
like
looks
both.
more like Conan, sort of in the original stories. So there's that,
exactly. I think it's just the cult following that Conan has that kind of swings it that way. Yeah,
and he doesn't go Al.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I thought, having seen images from the comics, that Arnie looked very much like the Conan, but I'm going to have to rely on you two for this, I believe, because you're obviously big fans of this genre and this particular version of this film, whereas I am still trying to remember what exactly it was I was looking at the time when I saw this, because I've only seen it a couple of times when I was young. So
I'm very fond of it.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this one.
My dad loved this film. He always used to sort of like make references to it just every now and then. I remember in my childhood he'd see something and say like, I think that's like something Conan the Barbarian would use, isn't it? So
did he ever sit you down on top of a mountain and tell you that you couldn't trust men, but you could trust steel?
He never did.
Steel.
He never did, but I mean, there were a lot of similar moments where we'd sort of like be at a castle somewhere or in Sherwood Forest, and he'd hand me a wooden sword, and it'd be quite similar, really.
Oh, it's good that you've grown out of that phase.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Do you remember that classic childhood moment when James Earl Jones turned up and killed your family?
Oh yeah, that was
as well.
That was certainly an event in my life. I mean, for better or for worse, that's where we are now, isn't it? I mean, pushing that wheel around for all those years, that was a bit of a chore. I can tell you.
That reminds me, if people haven't already met our illustrious host from our other show, History's Maddest Bastards, Mr. Stephen Harrison invented trench warfare by the process of hitting trenches with other trenches repeatedly and with much recklessness.
Yeah, don't tell Mike Everest about that.
He'll have you.
Oh,
he's
man.
also...
Speaking of Mike, he loves Conan.
He really does. He's a good friend of ours. He's a good reenactment friend of ours, because have we mentioned that we do battle reenactment before?
I don't know if we've mentioned that.
I don't think we've ever mentioned that. No.
Well, maybe we should.
Yeah, maybe next time we'll mention that. On with the show, I suppose.
Do you want to know
on with the show, and... Sorry, what were you going to say?
The most vague backstory to the film?
Yeah, give us a backstory.
It came out in 1982, and it was directed and mainly written by John Milius, who's one of my favourite maniacs. He's, I know that the last one that we did, we talked about The Big Lebowski. John Milius, who wrote and directed this film, is actually the basis for the character of Walter.
In The Big Lebowski, yeah. That's a brilliant film and one we viewed previously.
Oh, he was an amazing guy. I mean, it actually started off as a script by Oliver Stone, but it was eventually taken over by John Milius. But it's a real shame. This whole film is like an origin story for Conan. That doesn't really happen in the original stories. He kind of just turns up fully formed in those. So this was meant to be like him gearing up for a big trilogy, but the studio wouldn't let him do it.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
that's a shame.
We did get a sequel out of the films, but we didn't get the third film that seemed like it was coming.
I wonder how many trilogies Arnie has done. The Expendables, probably, but that's not really an Arnie film as such.
No, not very good.
The Terminator
it was a trilogy
saga. Well, that went beyond, but in terms of just trilogies, I don't know. I'd have to research that. I don't know why I find that so fascinating.
How many kindergarten cops are there?
One, I think. I don't think they made more than one. Shut up! Have you been eating other kids' lunches? Stop it!
Oh, I wish he would just shout at everyone. Just
on that note, we can bring the shoutiness of Arnie to life because I've got a little game for us, actually.
Ooh.
If you two fellas are interested. If you're not interested, you're going to have to do it anyway because I say so.
I'm very interested.
Just allow me to... I'm going to take a layer off because it's a bit warm in my shouty dungeon.
Yeah, if people don't know...
It says shouty dungeon. It's actually a cupboard under the stairs.
Yeah, Matt has built... have you ever heard the BTK killer? It's kind of similar to that. He's basically built some kind of rape murder dungeon under his staircase. It looks terrifying because all the walls are covered in that special foam that sort of suppresses sound.
It's not that bad. We touched upon this in the previous episode, actually. But
if someone went missing and I was a policeman and came around your house, I'd think, what's going on here?
They sort of open it up and go, what's that?
It's just foam manacles and bits of teeth.
I'm just jealous because you don't have your own shouty dungeon.
That's reminded me. So there was an electrician who came around to pat test some of the appliances in my flat.
Right.
And he, at one point, he had to follow some wires or something, and it went into one of the cupboards. And then I'd left my reenactment boots in there, my leather shoes, and the sheepskin insoles that I have for them, which had been dyed red by my red leggings.
Oh wow! Were they the ones inspired by our strange wizard beardy friend that we shall not mention in this podcast?
Yes. Absolutely,
I made these sheepskin insoles based on my own design.
Anyway, so this electrician looked in this cupboard, and all he saw were two leather boots and two what looked like bloody scraps of sheep flesh, because it was just like a load of sheepskin with red all over it, and I thought, should I explain? And then I just shut the cupboard.
That's the best of reactions you could have possibly had. I'll just shut that cupboard. That's not for you.
This is like
we'll forget about that.
When Matt and I used to live together, the police came around one evening to give us some smart water, and Matt had decided to polish every weapon in the house.
Well, they were all blunt. I don't remember this. I don't remember most of the stories you seem to recant.
Probably because you were drunk.
Maybe that's because when Simon held the white light up to the policeman's eyes and said, "You don't remember anything about this journey." Maybe it also reflected into your eyes.
What, the Men in Black thing?
We came in, and she sort of came into a living room, and there were all these like swords and axes laid out. And Matt was just like, "Hello, I'm just polishing the weapons." And she sort of just said, "Are you meant to have those?"
I don't remember that.
I remember you showed the prison shiv that we found in our little shed. He said, I don't know
I do remember showing off that. That was a quality...
For goodness sake.
Every house needs a prison shank that you just find somewhere.
Did she take it off you, or what?
No, she was like, you should probably get rid of that.
What, the prison shank?
Yeah, but I think we must have binned it eventually.
Prison shank.
It was just like a rusty blade out of a Stanley knife that someone had wrapped in duct tape and hidden in our shed.
Like black electrical tape. It looked really sinister. But anyway.
Sounds like a prison weapon. Yeah. So, Conan the Barbarian. We've just, we watched the film over the last couple of days.
It's marvellous.
And it's been nice to have something to do during lockdown, to be honest.
It's a genuinely good film. A lot of people think it's like just quite goofy, but it's actually quite good.
Yeah, definitely. So Matt, are we going to play your game then? Sorry, I derailed it with my sheep story.
Playing your games.
Oh, that's all right. So,
Yep, let's play this game then.
Okay, so the game that I have in mind, this is a collection of famous last words that I've put together.
Oh, the character in the film.
Well, it's not Arnold Schwarzenegger's famous last words. This is taken from 64 people and their famous last words by Chris Higgins from mentalfloss.com.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think there are many last words in the film. People just kind of grunt and then fall over.
No, so the way this game is going to work is I have a selection of quotes that I know who they're by. And so I'm going to drop some quotes into the chat. When I say so, each one of you is going to take a turn at reading them in the voice of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Then I'm going to ask you to figure out whose last words they were.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
Do you understand, Simon?
Yes.
Okay. So, the first one, how's your Arnie impression, Stefan?
I'm not sure, really. It's been a while.
Well, if I knew it was to be expected, I would have got one ready.
I can give you my best attempt.
Okay, so...
All right, let's have a go at this. At 50, everyone has the face he deserves.
So...
That was more like Mako, the wizard man.
No, I think it was, actually.
Who's in the film.
I think it's because we all had to go at reading the intro beforehand. That's probably why.
Can you do it any more Arnie-ish?
Let's try it. At 50, everyone has the face he deserves.
Very good.
That was more Guy Ritchie. At 50, everyone has the face.
Shit. Yeah. All right, come on, Simon. You do it as Arnie.
I can't. It's gone missing now. I can't read it anymore. Or is it just at 50?
Excuses.
At 50? No, I can't. It just turns South African.
Well, that's Stefan's one anyway. So,
okay.
Was that the famous last words of A, the singer Frank Sinatra, B, the writer George Orwell, or C, the comedy actor Groucho Marx?
Was it Groucho Marx?
It sounds like a Groucho Marx quote. I'm going to go with Groucho.
It was B, writer George Orwell.
They
were his last written words, and he actually died at the age 46. I've got down here, so he never actually got to 50.
Does that mean that he deserved to be a fleshless skull? Maybe.
Simon, I've got one for you. I want you to do your best Arnie voice and read this.
Wasn't told to prepare a voice. Here we go.
It's going to come out as Oliver Reed, I know it.
Oh, yeah. I've got Oliver Reed in my head now. But I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have.
But that was Oliver Reed.
Yeah, that's really... That's Oliver Reed playing Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Conan.
Oh, imagine if Oliver Reed was in this film.
Right, I think we should give Simon one more crack at that because I had 2 attempts.
Yes, definitely.
Right, Simon, remember...
I can't do an Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Remember, Arnie is Conan.
I have offended God. It sounds South African every time.
Give us
just
South
go for
African
it.
I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have.
Okay.
That was good. I like that.
Nice touch at the end. Yeah, I like that. So, was that A, painter/inventor Leonardo da Vinci? Was it B, founding father and politician Benjamin Franklin? Or was it C, physicist Richard Feynman?
Physicist.
I'm going to go with Da Vinci.
You are correct, Stefan. It was painter-inventor Leonardo da Vinci.
Nice. Yeah, it sounded like something that an artist might say, I think.
Shall I give you one more?
Yeah, one more.
Okay. I'm going to read this one out. So, the quote is, "I'll show you that it won't shoot."
I'll show you that it won't shoot.
Yep. I'll show you it won't shoot. And was that A, murderer James W. Rogers, B, mob leader Charles Lucky Luciano, or C, R&B singer Johnny Ace?
Was it Johnny Ace? It sounds
sorry,
like something someone would.
what were the first two options again?
It was the murderer James W. Rogers, mob leader Charles Lucky Luciano, or R&B singer Johnny Ace.
Ooh.
It sounds like
I'm going to go with the
something
mob
you-
leader.
It sounds like something you would say before accidentally shooting yourself.
It was R&B singer Johnny
Yes!
Ace.
Yes!
He died in 1954 while playing with a pistol during a break in
Told
his
you.
concert set. He was
I
actually
know.
performing a gig, and he said, "Look, I'll show you it won't shoot," and then he shot himself.
I know my accidental suicides. Yeah.
For some reason, that reminds me of the there's a thing I found on the list of unusual deaths, which is one of my favourite Wikipedia pages. And there was a guy who was trying to prove that this glass was unbreakable in a really high building.
Oh yeah, I've
So
heard this
he
one.
threw himself against the glass. The glass didn't break, but popped out of its frame, and he fell to his death.
God. Oh, it showed that the glass works.
Well, yeah.
But it's time to segue. If you like that, no one died making this film, but there were a lot of injuries, which we'll get into. So, what did you think about the film, everyone?
Well, we watched Conan the Barbarian.
Great
And,
film.
Indeed, we did.
we greatly enjoyed it. I think this really is a sort of adventure film from another era of filmmaking, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's inspired a lot of other films and
So
a
many
whole genre of film, essentially. The whole kind of high adventure.
High adventure.
And
Movies,
not just
like-
films, but sort of popular culture, RPG games, that sort of thing. We've said it has a massive impact upon.
Yeah,
And,
D&D. That's very Conan inspired. If you look at the Barbarian page.
Yeah, and
real
it sort of
thing.
set off a career for Arnold Schwarzenegger being
It
Arnold
was his-
Schwarzenegger in films.
It was
didn't
his first big hit.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Yeah.
know about the background behind it before we start?
Yeah, give us the background.
Yeah,
Um,
sure, yeah.
They're basically based on stories that were written in the 20s by this guy called Robert E. Howard. And
Oh, yeah.
he might be a candidate for our other podcast, History's Maddest Bastard.
Why, was
But
he a bit of a
apparently-
madam?
He was troubled. He had a troubled brow, unfortunately.
Oh, I
But-
heard a little bit about this, yeah.
Pretty
He was a
bad.
bit of a shut-in at times, isn't he?
It's hard to say because some people say he was just a guy who wrote a lot, and other people say that he was completely mad. Then no one really knows because he's not here to defend himself. But according
that's
to
when it's easiest.
no, well,
victory
according
is assured.
well, John Milius, who directed the film, was really
Oh,
drawn
John
to it.
Milius.
Well, he heard stories that allegedly, Robert E. Howard lived in Texas, and every now and again he'd decide the town was going to wipe him out, and so he'd think, I need to defend myself. So he'd board his house up and load all his rifles. I'm like,
Yeah,
But,
having watched the sort of making of documentary, it's weird to see John Milius refer to someone as a complete nut.
I love John Milius so much. He's a wacky man.
We may have touched upon him in our previous episode.
Yeah, he's if
when
you
we were
like a film,
comparing him to Walter from The Big Lebowski.
The Big Lebowski. If anyone hasn't ever seen The Big Lebowski, this character's played by John Goodman, who was basically John Milius.
Yeah.
And to
Am
get,
I wrong? Over the
Am I
line!
wrong?
Well,
Am I wrong?
to get ready for this podcast, I watched a documentary called Milius, which is about him, and they showed that film to his kids. And there's a bit in The Big Lebowski where a guy just fouls at bowling, and he gets a 45 out, and they're like, "Yeah, that's Dad."
You think I'm
Yeah.
effing around?
Am I the only one who gives a shit about the rules?
Has the whole world gone crazy?
If you want.
Market zero. Market zero.
Oh god! One story from this guy's background. While trying to get this film made, or it might be another one. I'm not sure. I had a drink when I watched it. They met
a
this
world of pain.
producer. Well, they met this producer, and like Walt, he pulled out a Colt 45, put it on the desk, cocked it, and said, "What up the spout?" And then he just said, "This is how I feel about this movie."
That's the man who likes his movies done the right way.
He's a visionary.
I can totally get behind that. I think John Milius and I might have gotten on just because if I was a director, I'd really not like criticism.
It's quite sad in a way because he really, really wanted to fight in Vietnam. He's kind of a contrarian because his whole generation was very against it.
Oh yeah, because of the whole must have been in Vietnam, the Big Lebowski sort of. Yeah.
He was obsessed with Vietnam because he had asthma, but he was really pro-war, but they wouldn't take him. he was left out. And when he was making this film, the original writer was Oliver Stone, and then they worked together to like work on this script. But Oliver Stone had been in Vietnam and made a film called Platoon about it, which is quite pretty rough. And apparently, all the time, John Milius would ask Oliver Stone about Vietnam, and he'd be like, "Oh, was it glorious?" I'm like, I'd rather not talk about that.
He's like an angry, militaristic George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, basically. If you imagine how George R.R. Martin looks now, it's the same voice, just
Vietnam. Two halves of the same person. Have you ever seen them together in the same room?
I haven't.
I haven't.
They both wear interesting hats.
They do, although John Milius used to wear berets all the time.
Yeah, John Milius might have to have an episode of his own, I think.
Oh, God. I've got one John Milius story before we get into it. When he was hired by a studio in the 70s, they asked him, what do you want to make? To like just write more scripts? Because he wrote Dirty Harry and it was a big success. He said, guns, girls, and gold. So they put him up in a hotel with some gold bars with some prostitutes. And they gave him like a motorbike with a sidecar. And then he wrote nothing. And someone from the studio turned up and said to find out what was going on. And apparently he rode past with a naked lady shooting an M1 Garand out of the sidecar going, whee!
We probably took him for a ride.
We probably shouldn't have given him all these lovely distractions.
This is prime podcast material for the John Milius episode, which hasn't happened yet. So
we'll get into it.
Remind us just quickly how he's related to this film.
He wrote he directed it and he rewrote a script that was originally written by Oliver Stone.
Yes,
and there's loads of John Milius in it.
Oh, yes, because I remember John Milius's issue was that he really wanted to have some kind of historical context to this.
Yeah, it is.
Oliver Stone's sort of take on it was pure fantasy, wasn't it?
Well, it was during Oliver Stone's cocaine phase as well. This was around the time
They're meant to be like massive units, military units of mutants and insect people. And
they couldn't have done it. If you watch this film, like compared to a modern film, in some ways it's strange because there's never more than about 20 people in a fight, but it still feels epic. But Oliver Stone basically, in an interview, just said like, I was really into cloning and mutants at the time. I don't know what was going on.
In what ways? In what ways do you think that Conan was a kind of groundbreaking film?
More definitely Arnold Schwarzenegger, because throughout the 70s, sort of heroes in films were quite. He describes them as little girly men.
Oh yeah.
Kind of sensitive, sensible people. And then the 80s came on.
There was somebody who definitely said, well, he'd seen Pumping Iron and he'd just been looking at Arnold Schwarzenegger and said, he's got a huge body and an amazing personality. What could we possibly
Conan.
get?
Well, John Milius, actually, this is a fun story. John Milius said, we have to have Arnold Schwarzenegger. And everyone was like, no, because he made one film before this called Hercules in New York.
Hercules in New York, yeah.
Hercules!
He wrestled a bear.
Have you not seen this, Stefan?
It was
he wrestles a bear, he said.
It's so good. It was when he first got to America, and there's stuff like he gets in a taxi, and they're like, that's $20, pal! And he's just like, Hercules is ridden in your chariot, it's an honor.
Like he goes along to a park and there's a bunch of guys throwing discus. He's like, oh, they don't seem to understand how to do discus properly. I will show them. You know.
It's amazing.
And a load of guys, because sorry to digress, but the guy's already playing discus. See Arnie come along, and this is straight out of his bodybuilding professional days.
Yeah. It was in his boob moving days. You know, when he got angry and his boobs moved up and down.
Well, these are like guys who are athletic-looking jocks. Along comes Arnie, and they don't seem to believe that he can throw a discus further than they can.
Actually, here's a little bonus fact. The studio didn't want to hire him, and they did. And he had to slim down to play the part because he couldn't move properly because he had these massive arms.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
So, like, you know, when he's training with a sword and he's like spinning it around, when they first started to do that, he kept hitting himself in the arm. They're like, your arms are fucking massive.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I've heard of actors having to... Sorry, just one last thing. I've heard of actors having to kind of slim down in terms of body mass, in terms of fat and that sort of thing, for a part, but never. I've never heard of them having to reduce their muscle.
Like Christian Bale for the first Batman movie put on way too much fat and had to de-bear himself.
I have a sneaky suspicion he just likes cheese because everything seems a big excuse to get to the next fat film.
Yeah. Well, not to lag behind because we are up against it tonight.
Yeah, we'll get back in the film. Arnold was basically cast because he was sent to meet the producer called Dino De Laurentiis. And he was like quite a small guy, and he had this tiered desk.
Yes.
So he would sit above you, and you'd be right below him. And apparently Arnold walked in and was just like, "Why does such a little man need such a big desk?" And he was like, "Oh, he's a barbarian, yes."
Hope I'm not treading on your toes, but I heard that Dino himself said, "Why do we need Arnold Schwarzenegger? I can barely understand a word he says." They said, "But Dino, nobody can understand a word you say." So they're quite well suited.
A bit of a callback because John Milius got obsessed with things. He got obsessed with Arnold being Conan. He was like, "He is Conan." He said he would only do the film if it was him or Dustin Hoffman.
What?
Yes, because he knew they wouldn't pick Dustin Hoffman. So they're like, "Oh, fine."
The great Hoffman.
The Hoffmeister.
Can you imagine Dustin Hoffman as Conan the Barbarian?
What does Rain Man go? I gotta avenge my family. Definitely. It wouldn't have been great.
I could
makes almost no sense.
Well, I could massively tangent here by saying about the film Thor. The guy whose name immediately escapes me, who plays Loki, he was originally meant to play Thor, so he got absolutely he got massive for that role.
Didn't he? Because he's
blonde hair and everything.
Slim man.
Yeah, he got recast as Loki, so he slimmed all the way down. But that's another film and another time.
He's like a charming cheese string. I can't imagine him getting bulked up.
He's an actual British, so of course he has to be a bad guy. Yeah.
But we got Chris here, didn't we?
I mean, isn't Chris Hemsworth British?
He's Australian.
He's an Aussie.
Big.
But
I don't think I've heard any interviews or anything where he's talking in his actual voice. So fair enough, yeah.
Just think he talks like, I don't know why I'm doing that voice. I can't do his voice. Just
on the subject of bulking up, I'd love to eat chicken like 6 times a day, to be honest. But I don't think I'd do the exercise that came with it.
What, like in this film, where
the number of times that Arnie just ends up eating chicken, they often pretend like some sort of exotic creature that is indigenous to those parts, but you can tell.
I got inspired by this film. I went out and bought 2 whole chickens, and I jointed them myself with my 6-inch chef's knife.
Can you say this whole paragraph, but in Arnie's voice? Because I think that would be better for an explanation.
What, the introduction?
No, just your story about
I went
chickens.
out to Asda and I got 2 whole chickens. It was 2 for about £5. And I took my chef knife and I jointed them up because it's actually quite economical to get the whole chicken and then joint it yourself. But the thing is, I took the carcasses from both chickens. I put them in the top drawer in the freezer. I was running out of sort of space in the freezer drawer, so I had to take some pizzas and put them in the fridge. And then I took the carcasses and I added some like onions and carrots halved. I didn't have any celery, but I put them in the slow cooker along with the chicken carcasses, and they are currently on the low setting, just making up some nice chicken stock.
That sounds nice.
You should smell it. It really is really quite something.
Can you give us one? Can you give us one to wrap it up?
Shall I tell you briefly? I was in Asda the other day before I got paid, and I had all the shrapnel, as you say, in a glass jar. I got 2-liter bottles of cider, which were like own brand Asda cider. And I was there with my beard and my anorak, and I was at the self-service machine. So I had this jar. I used all the silver coins, and I miscounted and thought I had way more than I did. So I took them to the self-service machine, put in all my silver shrapnel, and then I was forced to count through the jar to use only copper coins to pay for the rest. And I sort of held up the queue for quite a while. but I didn't care because I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Is
All
this
right,
the
let's just stop it there.
Schwarzenegger? Like, I saved 20p on the meal deal.
Oh man, you know that thing where you chuckle so much that you go a bit lightheaded? Yeah.
Did you swallow your own tonsils?
Not quite, no.
I've done that
So
before.
I
It's
just want to say to our listeners,
Is that a thing?
all 7 of you, none of that was scripted. That was just Matt talking about his day in
Well,
Ireland.
That's
don't know.
what I actually did.
He talks like this all the time, though. When we used to live together, I'm like, can you smell gas? Yes, that's a leak.
I'll be honest, Matt. I was
Get
expecting
out!
like a 30-second segment there, but instead we got 5 minutes of Arnie and his chickens.
I find that the addition of ginger and lemongrass is excellent to the soup, which I shall make later on.
Shall we?
That was wonderful.
I think we should discuss the film.
Let's talk about the film. Yeah.
How does it start? What happens?
Well, it's a young barbarian lad, isn't it? Receiving
Boy.
instruction in the riddle of steel from his big hairy father.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
his dad is making a sword through a method which isn't legitimate, I can tell you. That's not how you make
You
a
don't
sword.
Oh, you don't
You
cast
don't just pour
swords.
the stuff in and cast it.
Yeah, you don't pour them into an
like
open-topped mold. It looks fancy, but that's not how you make it. Back in those
Although,
days,
in fairness, I want to say this, right? So this is a slight spoiler, but I mean, it's just an event from the end of the film. So, like, we're spoiling the whole film, aren't we? That's why they're bloody listening
Watch
to
it
this.
first, then come back.
So the sword at the end, Arnie actually breaks it when he hits it with his sword that he finds in the cave.
Yeah, that's
So
confusing, isn't
that,
it?
in a way, I think that's almost like possibly someone who wrote the script or choreographed it in some way. Maybe they're kind of breaking the fourth wall and saying to the audience, "Yeah, it was bloody stupid how they made
Sword
that."
isn't that good.
well,
I've got
they're
a
meant
fact.
to. Oh, okay.
At the beginning, Conan's daddy makes the sword, gives him the speech about steel, and he's like, "Oh, you can't trust men, but you can trust the steel." He's a bodybuilder who Arnold looks up to when he was a kid, and he had posters on his wall, and he's like, "That will be me." So
that's really cool. I like that.
Nice. He is a big hairy man.
But yeah, so the film starts with Arnie's village getting raided by a group of warriors who are led by some kind of sorcerer, and they have a banner with 2 snakes.
Standard
over a
Which
moon
I
facing each
never
other.
noticed until they obliquely referenced it in the film. I was like, snakes? What snakes? It was about 30 minutes in.
Something, if no one's aware of it, there's a bloody gift on the internet. The commentary, which is just John Milius and Arnold, is available on YouTube.
Oh, nice.
And it is fantastic. There's a bit where, like, John Milius is just like, that's how you start a movie. You gotta wipe out a village.
To be honest, I could tell that somebody was behind this movie that was really into sort of big battles, horsemanship, and a lot of not necessarily violence just for violence's sake, but it didn't shy away from twatting people with big weapons. There was one guy with a giant hammer.
I love that guy.
If I had to sum it up in a few words, I think the things I really like about Conan that makes it seem kind of pure compared to a lot of modern adventure movies is the lack of CGI. The way that there's good horsemanship in that film.
And like
they're clearly actually burning stuff instead of using like flaming special effects and that sort of thing. A lot of the fighting, it's not. I don't know. I don't think it's really done with CGI either. I mean, going by the period it was filmed, you can kind of assume that's the case.
82, yeah.
They didn't really have it, but I get the feeling that if they did have CGI, they probably wouldn't have used it anyway.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the sword blows are kind of done by clever camera angles that makes it look like the blade is actually cutting into a guy's chest and that sort of thing. So in that sense, I think it's really, really raw, but also looks quite authentic.
Well, John Milius went to war with the whole studio over it. Because Dino De Laurentiis, who was like the producer, turned up on set one day and he saw a load of blood, like because there were like squibs that explode whenever someone gets stabbed. Yeah. And then he saw a big soup made out of human hands. And Arnold describes it where he said like, "Oh, little Dino turned up," and he does a little Italian voice where he goes, "Ah, you gross out all of the people." Which is amazing to hear Arnold do that.
I think this would be great for an Ask Doug segue.
What Are you all like Dino De Laurentiis?
Is Doug online?
He is online.
Oh boy, alone. That poor sweet
Can you
boy.
attempt to add him in?
I'll try. But keep talking for the moment.
While we're talking, link to other podcasts that we've done. Only John Milius, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and one other person are known to have made Dino De Laurentiis leave a set and say, "Let us make the film." Can you guess who that guy is? Brian Blessed!
Oh, of course it is.
Right, okay.
He crops up everywhere, doesn't he?
Well, apparently he would put off actors because he would just turn up and glare at them like, you'll make a good film. And whenever he turned up...
Well, I was going to say, to be honest, I think even without Brian Blessed, they might have met their match in James Earl Jones, who was...
Yeah, he's a good actor.
The primary villain for this. Oh, he did such a good job.
He's a great villain. There's apparently when he was, because he's the bad guy in this film, he watched loads and loads of footage of dictators to get ready. So his body language is like Hitler and Mussolini and
really
all the fanboys. So
and apparently sorry, carry on, and then I'll make my point.
Oh, basically that. Just he got obsessed with dictators to be kind of intimidating and charismatic, and it really shows.
Well, he's the leader of the sort of evil, weird, necromantic tribesmen, or whatever they are, the baddies.
And naughty snake boys.
Well, his emblem is all concerned with snakes, and they had a snake wrangler for the film, which was his job was to drape James Earl Jones with snakes and sort of get them used to filming with them. But the problem is that James Earl Jones was in the US military, and they had an indoctrination sort of program where they had to get used to snakes. So they got given a snake. They had to sort of keep it in their sleeping bag and spend like days with it and get used to it to the point where they were completely comfortable. And then they had to eat the snake.
Oh,
so the problem was James Earl Jones is so used to snakes, plus he grew up on a farm, so he wasn't a stranger to them. That the snakes they put on him, the snakes they put him in for Conan was so relaxed they actually had to get some kind of fluffer in to excite them up a bit.
Yeah, that was a bit upsetting. So on the making of, they sort of said someone had to wind up the snake a bit because he didn't look annoyed. Not.
Which reminded me, actually. So one of my favourite bits in the film. I guess I'll give a quick summary of the plot up to that point. So Conan's village gets raided. He ends up pushing this wheel of pain, as they call it, over and over again, seemingly for about like 15 years or something.
Yeah, it grows
until he's in his like early 20s.
Montage of pushing wheels.
And then after that, he goes on some adventures with Subutai, his companion. And then eventually they meet up with Valeria, who is the female lead character.
The Valkyrie!
And she turns out to be some kind of Valkyrie character at the end.
If you listen to the commentary, it is 90% John Milius perving on her. There's one bit where he's just like, look at her face, that Viking face. She's a warrior woman.
Look at her figure. She's a dancer. She's a dancer.
She's a professional dancer, Arnold.
I mean, I can't say I blame him. I think she's certainly my kind of woman. But you
want to settle down with someone who can chop a man's head off.
Exactly. I couldn't put it better myself.
She got her finger severed in a fight scene in Conan.
Did she? Oh
yeah,
man,
she had it sewed back on.
But this was before safety standards. Yeah, loads of people got hurt making this.
Really?
But no horses.
To be fair, imagine before I carry on with my point, being able to kind of in like 30 years after the film has been made, you can just sort of show someone, this is the scar I got from Conan the Barbarian when we were filming. That'd be a cool story. But the scene I was going to mention was the one where Conan, Subutai, and Valeria break into that tower, the Tower of the Serpent.
Tower fight.
And so she disguises herself as one of the priestesses, and meanwhile the other two slide down the rope and they go into this bizarre little pit they have at the bottom where there's a massive snake in there. And they have this little scene where they sneak in and steal the gem, but then Conan and Subutai have to fight the massive snake. And I just love that because you see Conan behead the creature and it actually looks kind of realistic considering.
Yeah, let's talk about that. It is the big mechanical snake because they couldn't CGI it or anything. So it's only actually shoving his sword through a machine snake, blood's coming out. And
He's actually
what's he
doing it,
called?
yeah.
Subukai, the other guy, he
Subukai.
actually had to shoot arrows into the snake past Arnie's head.
Well, actually, it wasn't Subutai who took the shot. Well, Jerry Lopez was the actor. It was John Milius.
John Milius himself.
That's even better.
He was the best archer on set.
Oh, man.
Well, apparently it was going to be Jerry Lopez. Then John Milius was like, "I must take the shot." No, like,
guys, I'm
Christ.
starting to see a theme here. Like, I think I've actually learned some quite profound wisdom from the research we've had to do for this podcast. Yeah. I think every good story, every good movie, they all have a madman behind it somehow.
Yeah,
that's my impression.
There's never been an interesting ship in history without a lunatic captain.
Yeah, that's true.
That's how it is, but he was fucking mad. I mean, apparently...
Did he ever do any Oliver Reed films?
No, but I wish he did.
Can you imagine the two of them? You don't do it like that, you do it like this. I'm going to be in this film. You must fight me now, Oliver Reed.
Well,
you must fight me now.
If Oliver Reed was allowed in this film, like, enough stuntmen got hurt. Like, there's a bit where Sandal Bergman, who plays Valeria, she wraps a rope around a guy's neck and kicks him down a pit. And in the commentary, it turns out that guy broke his leg because he didn't fall properly. I don't know how it worked. But in the commentary, John Milius was like, "Oh yeah, this was where Terry got really injured." And I was like, "Oh, he broke his leg."
Well, Arnie actually himself got injured during this because there's a scene even before the bit Stefan's now got to. There's a bit where he's set free by this sort of Wheel of Pain slave. It's because Arnie's fighting in the fighting pits and he makes a name for himself as a really awesome warrior. So the guy in charge of him sort of breaks his chains and lets him go, doesn't he? So Arnie runs off through the desert to this weird cairn tomb pit underground whilst being chased by wolf dogs. Well, wolves for the film, but they were kind of wolf dogs.
Well,
but apparently they weren't very well trained. They attacked their own owners in real life. Yeah,
their own. The Spanish trainer told John Milius he was scared of his own dogs.
Yeah, because they attacked the handler, and then they were set on Arnie as Arnie tried climbing up these rocks. And there's footage from the making of documentary of one just jumps on Arnie and starts trying to drag him down. And Arnie sort of fell over, and then one of them bit him on possibly his face. He said the dog was in front of his face going, "Arr!" and it bit him, and he had to have his first stitches of the film.
Yeah, and then
because he was savaged by wolf dogs.
I like how you say first stitches of the film because there are inevitably more.
Arnold called it that because he really likes John Milius. Because after that, there's a scene where Conan goes, it's the Atlantean general's tomb where he gets his sword.
Oh yeah, he falls down a bunch of rocks, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he's covered in blood, and that's his own blood. And John Milius was like, we're making a movie now. We got blood. And he was like,
and Arnie was saying, "I am bleeding, John. I am bleeding." And so John Milius was just going, come on, pain is temporary, but filmmaking, that's forever.
Yeah, he's a maniac. I mean, at the beginning, Conan's dad is killed by these Dobermans, not Debenhams, Dobermans.
Yeah, Dobermen.
The Spanish dog trainer went up to him and went, "Mr. Milius, these are bad dogs." And went, that sounds good.
That sounds like terrible conditions. Sack that dog trainer. Sack the dogs.
It's not the dog's fault, it's the trainer, but still, they shouldn't have.
But you shouldn't employ those dogs on that film.
If you watch, Conan's dad looks like he's shitting himself, and he's wearing loads of layers. So it's almost like, when you see when police wear like a bite suit, and the dogs just rip the shit out of it. Look, that's what happened. But
well, I can imagine John Milius being filmed while sat in his director's chair with his leg being torn off by dogs, just going, "That's movie making, that! That's movie making."
It's a movie.
There's something I really like about that kind of thing we see repeated throughout Conan, where it's kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of exploring a cave or crawling through a tunnel, and there's some kind of beasts either pursuing him or he's sneaking up on them. And he's basically looting it, and he gets gems or swords and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what you see in all kind of computer RPGs and indeed pen and paper ones as well. So
a lot of the Conan stories are like that because this is like an origin story that isn't really there in the stories. In the first one, he's the king already, which is what this film was building up to. But a lot of the stories are he'll be a king or he's an emperor somewhere or he's a pirate captain. And in the next story, it's like, I lost all the jewels anyway. I went to this other castle that was full of more jewels.
Does he have a different hat in each one?
Now, since we're kind of approaching the we got about 20 minutes left. If we're going by our original estimate for how long this would be,
we might add more on. But
I think we'll pause it. There's too much to discuss.
Well, I was just going to mention.
It's just such an epic film. Yeah,
it is. It really. So let's talk about the two henchmen of Thulsa Doom. Who's the villain?
Oh, I love those silly boys.
So we've got the other two absolute units, as I'll refer to them from now. One of them was one of Arnie's bodybuilding mates, and he's in all of Arnie's films, isn't he?
Thorsten.
And the other one, I think the other one was an American football player, if I'm not mistaken.
If you sort of told a child, draw a built man for me, boy, I don't know why you do it, that'd be weird. They'd draw that guy.
Come on, you boys, I've got a whole art class to teach. Draw me a built man.
They just do a really tall and chunky stick man with a big beard, and like, that's the guy.
Like if he had 4 arms, but you said that's too many arms, so you just stuck the arms together.
Well, he does have the wackiest axe in the world, which has about 3 axe heads on it.
He looks like at least a couple of guys that I've seen around the alternative pubs in Nottingham.
Yeah, actually. He's just basically a biker. He's got like a leather jacket on and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, he has that enormous, great big long leather jacket. There's just leather jacket, big motorbike boots and stuff. It is quite comical.
But apparently, because Sven-Ole Thorsen, I think he's Swedish, because John Milius is insane, he called them both the Great Danes. Because while they were filming Insane, apparently, the two of them would just steal golf carts and drive off into town and get battered.
That's amazing.
Like, big naughty dogs that I can't control, like the stunt dogs that injure all the actors. I can't stop them.
I think, John Milius said the only people that did get injured during the film were the Great Danes, but there are a lot of other accountings of people saying, John, I've been quite severely injured. And he just goes, come on. You're not
when Samuel Bergman
too injured to film.
Well, this is bizarre. Apparently Samuel Bergman's finger was severed with because we do reenactments. We fight with...
We mentioned that.
we like to have a scrap with blunt swords. Her finger was sliced off with a sheet metal sword.
Oh yeah, because she did a fight scene with an extra, wasn't it?
Yeah, instead of a
snake.
They'd done like no edging work on it to make sure it was safe. They were just like, that'll do.
Yeah. Do you remember when the three of us did filming for? I won't mention the organisation's name just because of the nature of what I'm about to say.
How could I forget?
The three of us did filming for a documentary as extras. And there were a group of stuntmen who had quite interesting kit.
They would have looked amazing.
They had aluminium swords that seemed to have edges, and I remember one of the stuntmen walking past me in his like bizarre regalia with
leather chamois sewn together.
There was one who was wearing
his finger was severed as well. So for some reason they seemed to just use aluminium swords.
That's a bit weird. Yeah.
Was that when we were filming Lost a Finger?
It was. He didn't lose a finger. When I say severed, I don't mean he'd severed a bit off, but he had like a big gash on his finger that was spewing blood out.
Oh, see, severed to me means completely off.
You see. Okay,
partially severed.
Because we've often talked about this lovely weekend. One of the amusing things happened was there was an actor who was meant to play William the Conqueror, and they gave him several stuntmen and said, "You kill him, and him." But he kept getting too excited and he would just start laying into the extras like us.
Wading into us reenactors going, yeah, come on!
I was fighting another guy in a little choreographed fight. And just like, oh, he's the actor man. And he just sort of pushed me over and went, no! He had a really good weekend, I think.
So, sorry, you cut out for me there, Simon. He pushed you over and said what?
No!
I saw him later with the makeup ladies just being like, I killed everyone. Like, were you meant to? I killed everyone. I think
In
he had a
fairness,
good
the makeup
weekend.
ladies were quite nice. I remember them.
If there
Anyway.
are any organisations that
me-
want to employ us as extras, we will happily oblige.
Will
Yeah,
divulge it.
I
I'll
think
say
we've
one
proven that
thing.
2 out of 3 of us are capable of making screaming noises. Oh, and
Ah!
speaking of,
The sweet boy.
here's Doug. Doug has joined us.
That lovely boy.
Hey, hello, Doug.
Hello,
You're
Doug.
live on Mustard Movie Night.
Are you well? What's happened?
Hello, I'm well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
He's
Has
so
the
much.
well.
cough got you? Are you well?
I'm good, Simon. When you're not my arm in my dreams, that's
Several of our listeners may recall Doug from previous episodes of our sister production, History's Maddest Bastards, when we do something called Ask Doug.
Which is
Well-
usually, it springs from something being mentioned about someone who's Italian in some way.
He's a nice
and
man with
then
a
we asked him a question
functioning life that we keep pestering.
Yeah, we just
So-
won't leave him alone. So
So
here's
I
Doug.
had a thought for how Doug could be relevant to this this particular podcast. So there may not be any Italian characters in Conan the Barbarian. However, what was the name of the bloke, the Italian bloke you mentioned before, Simon? Was he the producer?
Dino De Laurentiis.
Yeah. So he has a certain reaction to a particular thing that comes up in the movie. So Doug, I have to ask you, how would you react if you were involved, say, as an extra in Conan the Barbarian or some similar film, and you saw a big cauldron that had soup which had human hands and body parts in it? What would you say?
soup. I mean, why not put some nicer stuff in it?
I see. Fair enough.
Yeah,
What would you say if you were excessively Italian in that point of time?
And you saw you saw a human hand in the soup. What would you say?
Are you looking for me to say like Mamma Mia or something like that?
Mamma Mia.
That's a perfect reaction. Thank
Maybe
you.
That
like
was a
I
good
mean-
reaction.
Do the
for a
evil
second
eye
there,
at it.
I had the illusion that I could give a reasonable answer and it would be accepted. So I just went for the nearest Mamma Mia, and apparently that's
Ideally,
good enough.
we want an impression of an elderly grandmother who wore black all the time because her husband died 50 years ago. Who's like,
In a meatball accident.
No, that's
Yeah,
fine. Simon, tell Doug what the guy actually said.
well, Arnold Schwarzenegger did an impression of him where he said, "Well, this is Arnold Schwarzenegger voice, but so it's an impression doing an impression." He's like, you gross out all of other people," and he thought that was hilarious and wouldn't stop laughing.
I'm sorry, Doug. We do
That's
mean
all right.
you.
I'm sorry, Doug. This is the only
well-meaning,
way I
Doug.
could shoehorn you into this because I think it's the only way we could make being Italian relevant to Conan.
I think they need more Italians in Conan. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the
not enough
representation we'll
Italians.
take away from this. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Doug, you're welcome to stick around for the rest of it if you like. But
Have you seen Conan the Barbarian? Are you a fan? Did you enjoy it?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a fan. I think I've enjoyed every time I've seen it.
Get out!
Okay. All right. Well, I'll take my leave.
sorry, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
That's all right.
I've
Bye-bye.
been going on little walks near where you live, and every now and then, he's gone!
He's gone. I'm so sorry.
I have actually gone on walks near where he lives thinking, I might see Doug today, and I never do.
Oh dear.
Because
That was
you
great.
fucked it up.
I really worry that people will get the wrong impression and think that we're not actually friends.
No, they know that we love Doug. I mean, that is common knowledge. Don't worry.
Have you
about it.
noticed that whenever we bother him, he's doing something healthy? Like he's always like he's
Our
always
restaurant
out with his family or he's on a date or something. He's always sort of having a life, and we're like, Doug, we saw a film with boobs in it, and it was pretty good. Italians.
Yeah, it's like if we were a bunch of miscreants sat around a dictionary trying to outwit Stephen Hawking. And it's like,
That's easy.
we've looked up a new word, Stephen. Oh, this one's got 5 syllables. Oh.
To be fair, I guarantee, now I've looked into that man's life, if he wrote boobless on a calculator, he would have pissed himself.
That's the
I mean,
impression I get from
anyway,
our
but-
interactions. Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Sorry about that.
Anyway, we'll go
Oh,
back.
God.
I think there will be a pause because we've got 10 minutes into the film and there is more to discuss because it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
What?
That is true.
What? Sorry, I'm dying.
He's got the Rona.
So, not
How do you
anymore.
feel?
Hey! I've
but-
isolated myself for the correct period of time for last time. Just because I'm partly Chinese doesn't mean I've got the corona.
Well, to be fair, that is a factor.
So I could have starred as an extra in Conan the Barbarian as one of the weird archery guys, but yeah, sure.
Well, actually, that guy, he's meant to be sort of fantasy Japanese. He's actually Hispanic. He's called Jerry Lopez.
Yeah.
He's one of John Milius's surfing mates.
Ooh.
John. Ooh.
What nationality was the weird wizard that you said I should have played?
Oh, he's Japanese.
Okay.
Mako.
Yeah, I think he was quite famous. I think he's Japanese American, but he's quite famous. He played Splinter in Ninja Turtles, apparently.
Oh, really? The Rat Sensei.
He's got that old wise voice because he's an elderly wizard man in it. But
I will,
because he's an older gentleman.
To be fair, I do see one day you living like that, just on a beach, living in a house on stilts, telling a muscular man that you're a wizard.
Stefan on me. Me?
I think probably both in a flat share. I don't know.
I mean, I'd love to ride along on a horse and stop outside Matt's little hut and go.
He's like, I'm a wizard, you know.
Why do you live down here? And Matt will say, fire won't burn up there. No fire at all.
Oh,
that's why I live down here in the wind.
That's quite interesting because how far along have we got in the plot? We haven't got close to finishing the plot.
No, we haven't. So we've talked about the bit where they raid the temple and how Conan's village gets sacked and the Wheel of Pain, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So then we also briefly mentioned the two henchmen.
The henchmen.
The henchmen. Oh.
Yeah.
Those big, delicious boys.
So,
big hairy boys and big
what
coats.
are the other main points? There's a bit where Conan punches a camel. We haven't talked about that yet.
Oh, after he eats some meat on a stick.
So there's a bit where I don't think it was the meat on a stick that's supposed to have caused that. There's a bit where one of the traders, they come up to you and they ask him about the standard with the serpents. He says, hey, and he looks all shifty and says, Black Lotus, the best, or something like that. And it's supposed to be some kind of drug. And
would you like to know who that trader man is?
Tell us.
He's the film's designer called Ron Cobb.
Hey. Oh, right, okay.
And he did loads. Like he was one of the main designers for Star Wars and Alien as well. And it kind of, you can see his little fingerprints all over the film because everything looks lived in. You know, when you watch some fantasy films like the Warcraft film that came out a while ago, everything looks very clean and new.
Looks very plastic, yeah.
Yeah, whereas he's very into, it's called like a lived-in universe. Like it looks like a city where people live.
Like everything's got a purpose, basically.
Yeah, like even like he designed the Wheel of Pain, and that's apparently to.
Speaking of set design and the Wheel of Pain, I saw a little factoid. Basically, they delayed filming for so long that they might be able to film it in winter and get actual snow because they filmed it in Spain, didn't they?
Yeah, it's cold as fuck there.
So they delayed filming for so long, but the snow wouldn't actually come. So they got all these fake snow machines out and started hosing down the surrounding area with fake snow and started filming, and then it snowed. But the problem was filming the Wheel of Pain scene because they wanted to show transition of time. One part of it was Arnie pushing that wheel in snow, but he was hardly wearing anything.
Yeah, he's just in his little pants, isn't he?
Yeah, he's meant to be sweating.
That's just because he's hard as nails. That's the thing.
Well, it was snowing, and also they were blowing these fans in to make the wind blow his hair about and stuff like that. So he was actually freezing cold. So Arnie said, "Oh, the one thing I wanted them to bring me was hot tea with schnapps, and then I was happy to look like I was sweating."
Well, then again, this is history time. During Napoleon's catastrophic campaign in Russia, a lot of officers said schnapps was the only thing that kept them alive.
Yeah.
Like, I need that delicious schnapps.
I wish I had some schnapps right now.
I know.
I haven't had schnapps for years.
I've had it a while ago on New Year's Eve when I accused some lantern people of being arsonists, but I was very drunk. But never mind.
There was a pub I used to go to back in my teenage days called Carpe Diem in Leeds. And it was a sticky place where you used to be able to buy 6 shots of schnapps for £5.
Yeah, but Leeds is a sticky city.
It was a bit. And I remember trying to do 12 shots. And by the end of it, I was pretty much just flinging them into my own face. Literally. Glass not meeting the lips, just
If anyone...
We digress.
If anyone's never lived in Leeds, an example of that, I lived there a couple of years ago. I was once waiting for my bus. After work on a Wednesday, someone came out of a pub, which I assume had a toilet, and just started pissing all over the bus stop.
Okay, right.
That's Leeds!
Anyway.
So, Conan, or Conan, as he calls it.
Conan.
He can't say Conan.
Conan.
If you watch any making of thing, he just calls him Conan. It's like Conan.
Conan. Well, I'm actually coming up to. We're shaving off the last few minutes before we pause. I think, aren't we?
I think we'll have to pause. I'm sorry, Stefan.
Okay, and we'll reconvene with more talk of the plot point. Where have we got to in the plot?
Nowhere.
I think we've just about got to the bit where it would be relevant to mention King Osric, possibly. Should we start from there next time?
Yeah, let's start from there when we reconvene. Possibly.
Okay. In that case, I'll kick the butt out the server.
He's my favourite.
Wow! Get to the temple! Don't sever your finger in a fight scene.
Oh, that poor lady. She suffered for that film. It's day 22. It's day 2. Hey.
Yeah, we have resumed.
We ran out of time. Normally these take an hour, but there's a lot to be discussed.
Back into it, boys.
So, as I suggested at the end of our last segment, I think the next logical bit to start with is after the temple heist, as it were, where they steal the Eye of Set.
Yeah.
killing
the snake. Yeah.
Our heroes get rather drunk and merry with all of the spoils that they've.
I love that.
And that's where Arnie is fingering all the jewels.
Yeah, and he punches
I
a
wonder
camel.
what you're going to say then. No, he punched the camel well before that.
There is.
Oh right, okay.
But
there is a bit on Arnold's commentary. There's a bit where they're sharing the jewels, and he gives. Is she called Valeria? I've forgotten.
Yeah.
He gives her like the big jewel, and Arnold just goes on the commentary. Even in prehistoric times, the women all about the jewelry.
I do love how he did that sort of weird, she's slowly inching her hand towards the jewels and he's not looking at the jewels, but then he knows she was trying to grab the jewels because it was really bloody obvious. So, I will not let you take those, take the biggest one.
And he sort of rubs the jewel on her hand a bit and it's kind of implied that she has to repay the favour.
And they start banging, do they?
Yeah. But, of course, there is one of my favourite bits where Arnie is trying on various hats, and I think it was helmets actually. He's trying on various helmets, and all these merchants are flocking around him like, "Oh, let's all get a piece of his money."
This is a man that likes a good helmet.
And then he falls asleep in a bowl of porridge.
Oh, that's amazing.
How drunk was I when this bit happened? Bloody hell.
I don't know.
Is this what got you into reenacting, Stefan? It's quite similar. You try on a load of hats, you get drunk, and you fall asleep in some cereal.
Pretty much, yeah.
It happens every single time.
And I've lived that experience over and over. It's great. But yeah, so they get taken before King Osric, who initially you're kind of led to believe that he's going to punish them and chastise them for being thieves. But instead, Mr. King Osric has a quest for them to go and rescue his daughter that's fallen in with the snake cult that they've just been robbing.
You know who plays him as well?
Max von Sydow!
Yeah, who had just been Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon.
Ming.
I love that film.
I can't not laugh if I say the name Ming, but you know, he was good. Yeah, it's good. Good guy.
So almost minge.
There's a great quote there as well, actually, where so Conan and Valeria get dragged in, and I love the bit where the king says, I'm told there was a third, or something like that. And Valeria just steps forward and goes, our companion, he died in the gardens. The lions ate him. To which Max von Sydow goes, the lions ate him. And then they just drag him in, and he goes, the lions ate him. Obviously, the lions didn't eat him.
It's quite sad in a way because he's basically future Conan. Because it's mentioned that he was a barbarian like Conan. He became the king, and he's just fed up. So he loves it that they've turned up and like stolen this jewel. It's like,
He sort of reminds me of
Hrothgar in the old sort of Beowulf stories.
Kind of, yeah.
13th Warrior.
He's actually similar to, if you want to hear about it, the first Conan story that got published. Well, the first one that was written, because that's fantastic. If anyone does want to read it, in that, Conan's already the king, and he's sitting around fed up because he misses being a warrior, because he's writing a map, and he's not keen on it. And there are all these foppish nobles who think he shouldn't be the king because he's not of the blood, he's not one of us, and they all gather on.
I'm not exactly thrilled with this map.
He's just like, and then they decide they're going to break into his bedroom, and they're all sort of wearing these silk robes, and they're going to get him, and they've all got knives. But Conan works out what's going to happen. So they kick the door in, and he's waiting in the dark, fully armored up, holding an axe, and he just starts laughing. And
when you say
fucking great, I love it.
Yeah, when you say fully armored up, what exactly is he wearing?
He's got his loincloth on.
Yeah, well, no, in the stories he always wears armor.
And his
he's got, I think it's called scale in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he's wearing more in his little pants.
Like the sort of traditional early 80s Hollywood leather jerkin with metal squares on it.
Well, this was written in the 20s. But yes, he's wearing metal. Yeah. He's clad in metal.
That's really interesting. You know, when you ever see depictions of battle reenactment from the 20s and 30s and 40s, they sort of made their own proto-reenactment armor out of whatever they could find. I always found that quite fascinating.
Yeah,
how they could make that.
They were into the horned helmets back then as well, bless them.
Yeah.
That's another tale! But yeah, have either of you seen the deleted scene with the king?
No.
That's quite sad. Right after he sends him off, I think Stefan's seen it. The king's murdered.
Yeah, so King Osric says, "Go and rescue my daughter." He makes that little speech about how, this dagger was put in the hand of a son to kill his father. Does my daughter have a dagger like this for me? And so he throws a load of jewels at them and says, "Go and rescue my daughter."
Oh yeah, I forgot about the jewel handing over. Have these jewels.
He's just like flinging rubies at them.
Yeah, literally.
Did you ever throw bits of pretend Lego glass at people as a child and pretend they were jewels and go, "Here's the jewels, away with you"?
I didn't, but I can fully believe that you did, Simon.
No, I would have just kept them all for myself.
But yeah, so where was I? King Osric gives them the jewels, and then they leave the room, and then just after that, it turns out a load of his guards have been his guard has been infiltrated by the snake cult. Either that or they've just been paid off, and three of them stabs the king. But he does take one of them down with him, I'm pretty sure.
You mentioned that. You mentioned that at the time, but we never saw that,
Yeah, we should definitely watch that after we've recorded this. It's great because, as you said, he used to be like Conan, and the old man shows that he's still got some metal.
Don't say it.
Well,
he used to be an adventurer, like.
They don't put any arrows in his knee, though. It's a different way.
Actually, saying that, we briefly referenced it. Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls and other sort of RPG games must have been heavily influenced by Conan.
Oh, big time.
I think so. Yeah.
Or loads and loads of like homoerotic barbarian films came out of Italy in the 80s.
Norse.
There's hundreds of them.
Because were sort of Viking adventures as popularized before Conan as they were once it came out?
But in the stories, he's not really meant to be like a Viking.
They're Sumerians, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely the whole look of like a barbarian that you get in stuff like Warhammer and things like that is definitely this film. Well, it's really... there's a painter called Frank Frazetta who paints a lot of the book covers for Conan, and he kind of invented this wacky idea that everyone wears pants.
Yeah!
Nothing else.
Like they're protected by their bare skin because the rage sees them through.
Well, if you watch the sequel, in that, he's just got boots, pants, and like a little leather circlet on his head.
Boots.
It's all boots and pants. That's what will protect us against the goblins, just my little pants.
Holy pants.
You'd put a jumper on, wouldn't you, if you're going in a
dungeon?
dungeon?
I'm looking at some of his art now, actually. So it's interesting because, as you say, barely anyone's wearing a shirt. They're all wearing little loincloths. They all have really kind of cool, sort of funky spiked helmets with tusks curling around everywhere.
Yeah, he was a trouble guy. The painter. He actually did another film that we might review called Fire and Ice, and Frank Regetta, the painter, was like heavily involved in that. And
There's
most of it,
I must admit, there's a lot of bare-chested women on here as well.
Yes, there's a lot of boobs.
It's a recurring theme.
Well, this film was.
so
this film's pretty much perfect for 13-year-old boys. It's just boobs and blood.
Yes. Well, what I do love about this whole concept of the barbarian is it's like the barbarian sort of breaks apart all the other established rules on who could defeat an enemy. You must train for years in the finer arts of swordplay and horsemanship and blah, blah, blah in a civilized way. No, forget that. Here's a barbarian. He'll just break everything apart. All these mind tricks don't work on him. He's just really strong and angry. And
that's kind of what. Yeah, I agree. That's if you look at the D&D rules for barbarians, it's kind of essentially just that, isn't it?
Do they do the voice?
Do they what?
And because they're not of that civilized world at all, I mean, how many like true historical tales have we heard of Visigoths and Huns and that sort of thing? You're all meant to be barbarians because they weren't of the same society as like ancient Greeks and Romans and that sort of thing. Barbarians who were respecters of nothing, just destroyed cities and burned places to the ground, supposedly, and just viewed like trinkets and treasure as being important things and not culture and literature and that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
there are many people like that. Trinkets.
Yeah, they're still around, aren't they? Actually, but we won't go into.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
like
I
my
mean,
trinkets.
So where do we go from here? The party sets out to go and think about how they're going to rescue the king's daughter.
They bloody break up because Valeria doesn't want to go.
Valeria wants to take the jewels and
fuck off, basically.
And leave. There's a quote she says, actually. I think it goes something like, "I've never had so much as now."
Whoa.
Many times have I walked past people holding each other in the night, and I've always been alone. That sort of thing. I'm paraphrasing, kind of, and she kind of says to Conan that she's happy that she has him now, basically, and they can sort of face the world together, whatever the consequences. Conan kind of looks at her, and then he looks at the snake medallion, and then looks back to her, and I can tell that's supposed to be him kind of thinking, what do I do, and kind of weighing up what's more important to him.
Would have been a bit disappointing if you just decided, yeah, you're right, let's just go spend all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I mean, he strongly suspects these are the people that killed his tribe as well, so he's not going to forsake his honor, and that shows you the character of Conan.
Well, James Earl Jones being the only Atlantean on the left in the world.
That's not really in the scripts. Like, there's little bits, but he's meant to be about 1,000 years old, and he's like the only Atlantean left.
And he has magical powers.
He's a magic snake man. But if you want an example of how tone deaf Arnold is, at that point in the film, in the commentary, he's just sort of asked John Mears, like, "What's going on now?" And he sort of is explained to Arnold. It's quite good character development that Valeria's like never had any kind of friendship, or she's never been with anyone. And she actually happiness frightens her because she doesn't know what to do with it almost. And Arnold just goes, "Women never happy, are they?"
Actually, have we referenced that moment, which is Arnold's first line in the film, when they ask him, "What is good in life?"
Oh yeah.
What is best in life? Yeah, we missed that.
What is best in life? We didn't actually mention that.
And you get this first guy who looks like one of these kind of general types that.
He's basically Genghis Khan.
And he's like, what is best in life? And this one random bloke just stands up thinking like, yeah, I know the answer to this one. This is an easy one. And he says, the open step, fleet horse, falcons at your wrist, and the wind in your hair.
And they all go, nah.
To which the guy who asked the question just goes, wrong. Conan, what is best in life? To which Yanni, of course, says,
to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of the women.
And then everyone cheers like, yeah, he said it.
One guy just sort of goes, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'd like to go to one of these Mongolian tent parties where you just sort of shout things and all go, ah!
Maybe we should host our own one and have Matt as the Khan.
I would love that. One of you can be Conan, the other guy can be, well, I don't know.
I'll be someone. Simon, you can be Conan.
Can I be the ginger guy with the massive head?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think that's his hair, not his actual skull, but you can't tell. It's a mystery. But there's one horrifying part in the commentary, though. There's a bit where it's a bit weird. They decide, they're going to breed him when he's still a gladiator, and they sort of bring a woman to him. And
It's a little bit rapey.
I know. And then on the commentary, like John Milius is like, this actress had no idea what was going on. She looks terrified. Like, what?
That's a bit risky, hey, boys.
Did you explain, like, we're going to put you in a cage with a big muscly man? It's not ideal.
We're never going to get through this plot, are we?
No, we're not. Let's fast forward a bit. So,
sorry, Stefan.
That's all right. So Conan decides he's going to go off and pursue the snake cult.
I honestly thought you were going to say he's going to go off and piss.
Well, he probably did that at least once.
He probably did a few times. But yeah, so he goes off to pursue the snake cult, and he somehow finds his way to these ruins. And do you remember the wizard who he meets there?
Yeah.
Well, he's elderly Matt.
Apparently is me, is it?
In the future, you're going to live on a beach on a house on stilts. And then a muscly man will come back and you'll be like, wait.
You're saying I'll end up like this guy, just living on a hilltop in a hut with a dressing gown around me. Going,
90% of his dialogue is just, wait,
yeah, exactly. And that kind of reinforces for me the pure genius that is Conan the Barbarian's dialogue, because there's barely any of it for half the film. And when there are people talking, they have sometimes the characters just making noises rather than actually forming words. So you've got the wizard kind of like casting a spell at one point, and he sort of puts his thumbs together on his head and goes, and,
God.
And somehow that works.
Well, John Milius wanted it to be like a Wagnerian opera because the soundtrack's so good. He just thought, I want it to be music and emotion, and they don't really need to say that much.
Yeah.
And it really works. Because this film, in a way, like, it's such a stupid premise for a film. It almost doesn't deserve that soundtrack 'cause it's so good.
The soundtrack is amazing. And the bit where, I'm jumping forward a bit here, but there's a bit where they're sort of sneaking into James, I can't remember his name in the film, James Earl Jones' big temple.
J.
With the snake transformation scene.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, there's all that.
That music. That's more like 1940s easy listening. Just James Earl Jones gonna turn into a snake. There he goes. He's as thin as a rake.
Yeah, I wrote down the name of the composer, but
that's all Polidorius. I don't know how to say his name.
Yeah,
Polidorius.
that's the one. Yeah,
he did bloody
fantastic job.
He's so good.
Did he?
Yeah, he's a bit of a confession at the moment because we're all in lockdown. I can only work out by playing his music, and then I get all angry and pretend I'm a muscle man and go like that.
Stripped to the waist, lifting shields, eh?
Well, the good thing is if you're a chubby man, then if you've done a tiny bit of a workout, it looks like you're a bit muscly in the mirror for 10 minutes. So I can be there like, melts by lunchtime, but it's nice for a little bit.
You know what that is? That's the pump. The pump. Oh, it's the best thing in the world. It's like coming now.
Oh, well, Arnold was actually hard because of that documentary, Pumping Iron. And have you seen it, Stefan?
What was that? Sorry,
Pumping
Iron.
Don't think so.
It's
you need
mental.
to see it. It's amazing. That's basically what got Arnold cast in this film.
There's a bit in it where he's training another bodybuilder and the guy faints and Arnold just goes, "Come on, let's get serious." And I think
let's get serious.
100%.
And there's a scene where he's talking about. This is a massive tangent, but it's when he's talking about lifting weights to the point where your muscles just go into overdrive and stuff, and he calls it the pump, like the adrenaline pushing around your body and all the endorphins. He goes, it's like coming, it's better than coming. It's like I'm coming in the gym, coming at home, coming sitting in the chair. I'm coming right now. Oh, I'm coming all the time. Honestly, that's not far off, I think, what he actually says in the film. It's just weird.
We'll review that next. But in the film...
in Conan...
One of my favourite bits of Arnold acting comes up because he goes to infiltrate the snake cult and he decides he needs to get a priest's robe so he can sneak in. He pretends to be shy.
I'm shy.
He's like, I'm shy!
Because that guy is obviously hot and bothered and up for a great big brawny guy in a tense action there.
John Milius has said since film came out he regrets that scene because Arnold sort of tricks quite a camp priest into thinking there's going to be some love time.
He didn't take much tripping though, did he? That guy was well up for it.
Yeah, John Milius has said since then it's a little bit homophobic, but it's not too bad. He does beat him up, which is quite bad, but he is one of the baddies.
Yeah, exactly.
I personally thought he made a great creepy priest, but maybe I'm biased. I don't know.
I mean, you know what they say about priests. But yeah, anyway.
I know. Yeah. I mean, I thought Arnold was far too old for him, but there you go.
Maybe I'm just biased from having seen the flying geese so recently.
He's one of my favourite priests on screen. Just, you'll all die in a lake of blood.
I'll curse you from every hilltop.
I've got a Dakota. Fun fact, he was Porthos in the Musketeer films with Oliver Reed.
Oh, wow.
God.
Yeah.
There's always a link to Mr. Reed, isn't there?
Everything comes back to Oliver Reed.
These Hellraisers of history.
Anyway, back to Arnold.
Yeah, so Arnie goes to the gathering of the snake cult, and he dresses
on the snake.
And he eventually gets found out, and they beat him up and then drag him off so that Thulsa Doom can interrogate him.
They beat him up. It's weird because he's a unit for most of the film, and there's this one bit when he's caught unaware, and they just kick the shit out of him.
Oh yeah,
yeah. There are like hundreds of them there, and there's also the two absolute units that are there.
Oh.
That's the thing. I was just trying to theorize how much damage they actually did to Conan, because Conan could probably take a beating.
Well, he certainly takes the beating, and then he has his only like proper conversation with Thulsa Doom at this point in the film. Where he
killed my family. You killed my family.
You killed my people.
But Thulsa Doom. Oh, sorry.
That's it really. Just like Thulsa Doom was like, did you trade the gem away, or what's his name says you traded it to a girl, probably for a mere night's pleasure, and you killed my snake, and that is what grieves me the most, or something.
Where Sven Ole Thorsten, the big muscly unit man, just sort of nods and he goes like, Thorsten is beside himself with grief.
Thorgrim. Yeah, Thorgrim raised that snake from the time of its birth, and Thorgrim's got a snake on his shoulder at this point, I think, already. So
I think we discussed the snake wrangler yesterday for a little bit. Apparently, has anyone seen Tiger King recently?
I haven't, but I've seen the memes.
Yes, I have, yeah.
It's similar to that, because there's a guy in that called Doc Antle who's a bit of a creep, and he owns a load of tigers, and he kind of lures in young women to work for him for free, and they're in this wacky sex cult. And when they were making this film, the Snake Wrangler turned up with all these glamorous young women, and most people there were like, why are all the people who work for him like supermodels? What's going on? But Arnold and John were just so they didn't see anything wrong with it. But it's weird. I don't know if that's an exotic animal thing. Like if you're any kind of animal wrangler, you have to run a wacky sex cult. Who knows?
Oh yeah, that doctor. I can't remember his name, but he's not in the film.
I don't think you could do that in Britain if you're running like a hedgehog sanctuary. Just luring in impressionable women. You want to stroke a hedgehog? You can't feed them milk. There's a mysterious fact of the hedgehog.
I'm just reading here. I'm just reading trivia here, actually, that James Earl Jones, Arnold Schwarzenegger helped James Earl Jones stay in shape, while James Earl Jones and Max von Sydow taught Arnold how to act.
Oh, that was nice of him.
Yeah.
But James L. Jones is fantastic. He has such good lines in it.
I would love to one day, because I don't know if I've mentioned, but I'm embarking into the world of voice acting.
Do you want to give it a plug? Give it a plug. What's it called? What do you do?
Oh, what? I have a YouTube channel called Mott's Herald Narrates, where I do book narrations and put them on my YouTube channel. And I've done a bit of voice acting, but it's still, I'm an aspiring actor. But I would love to one day become anything like as formidable a voice actor as James Earl Jones.
What do you think about? Oh, sorry.
I think he's so good that they basically had him play himself in the remake of The Lion King. Well, not play himself, but
yeah. Well, he is a lion. I mean, that's a little known fact about him.
He played Mufasa in the first version, and I'm pretty sure he played Mufasa again in the remake. How good is that?
When you see James Earl Jones in a film, they've used special effects because the real James Earl Jones is actually a face and some clouds.
You have forgotten who you are.
Oh,
but you have forgotten me.
I can't do his voice, so Matt would probably better, but there's a bit later on in the film where they've really pissed him off, and he's saying, like, I will remind them why they fear the dark.
Oh, yeah, so that's skipping forward quite a bit.
There's so much plot to cover.
Basically, shall I summarise a bit? They catch Conan, they crucify him, like Jesus and or Odin.
Crucify him upon the tree of woe.
The tree of woe.
Sorry, that point, where he's getting eaten by a vulture and he bites the vulture to death? That was a real vulture.
Yeah.
Was it?
And so when he did that, he bit the vulture. It was a stuffed one, but it was a real vulture. They gave him some stuff to gargle so he didn't get horribly sick.
He didn't, because when Ozzy Osbourne bit that bat, he had to have rabies shots for months in his ass.
Yeah.
But with Arnold, they're like, John Miller's just like, you need to have Listerine, that cures all ills.
They wanted it to be completely different to the Jesus crucifixion, whereas Jesus was all, I'll take whatever punishment you have to give me. And people are saying, look at your God now. Whereas Conan is just saying, fuck you, I will die, fuck you.
It's John Milius's favourite moment in the film is when he bites a vulture, but it's also the closest to Conan, like the original.
Yeah,
the story Conan.
It's very barbarian, isn't it? It's like even when he's been nailed to a tree, and I only noticed the nails this time round because I've watched it several times, but I hadn't noticed the nails. I thought they just tied him to the tree, but he just clings to life because that's his barbarian spirit, isn't it?
Fuck you. There's a bit of controversy because the way Arnold described it in the makeup was John found the vulture that was dead. And there's theories about it. They think, like, where did they get a dead vulture from? Maybe they found one, which is really irresponsible. But I subscribe to the theory that John Milius shot it.
I would with an arrow,
or with a homemade slingshot that he wished he could have used in Vietnam,
or he shot it with a straightened snake.
Oh yeah, that happens later in the film.
Yeah, sorry, Simon. Shall we summarise further?
Actually, it's quite good not to get too bloody, social justice about it, but it's quite nice that even in 1982, the whole structure of a lot of films is inverted because he's actually rescued by Valeria instead of the other way around how it is in most stories. She actually comes to find him.
Yeah, because he gets quite grievously close to the point of dying, doesn't he? Because of the crucifixion. Then they wrap him up in swaddling bands and they draw symbols on his face.
And then you rescue him.
Oh, yeah.
Wait,
so is Matt all of the vaguely Chinese people in the film now?
Basically, any film we watch from now on, anyone vaguely Asiatic, that's Matthew.
Even the Hispanic ones.
Yeah, I think so.
Or just John Wayne in makeup.
John Wayne. That's another film we'll have to do, The Conqueror.
It's so good. There's so many great clips of him just going, I am a Mongol.
Oh, God.
That was an evil laugh as well.
That was a good... But anyway, so...
Crucifixion, resurrection.
They take him to the wizard, and they have to try and fight the spirits to keep Conan in this world, sort of.
Yeah, she clambers on top of him, doesn't she?
Oh,
yeah, the wizard says to them,
Why?
fuck's sake. Do you want to tell the story about that bit?
Can this be part of our weekly segment for the dads called "What'd you do, huh? Hey,
just tell us the story.
No. Well, there's two. One is that John Milius was really influenced by samurai films.
Yeah.
So this whole thing comes from Japanese folklore. There's a character called Wichi the Earless. I probably mispronounced that. And he had all this writing done on his face. This is a very good description. And demons come, try to get him, but he forgot to paint on his ears, so they took his ears, which is why in the film Arnold's ears are covered up. But the behind-the-scenes story is, allegedly, while Sandal Bergman, the actress, was sort of like riding Arnold and crying while the demons are trying to take him away. The way he describes it in the commentary was like, "Oh, we had I forget how he said. He just said, I was very exposed, and she had to get off." Or something like that. So it sounds like, because Arnold's a fucking animal, he probably got a boner and she got annoyed.
He actually fell asleep when they were painting him. He said it was like getting a massage, lovely therapy, you just have to lie there. I fell asleep.
It's strange listening to the commentary because John Milius loves this film and he put a lot into it, and he's like, "Oh, look at this! I love this moment," and Arnold's just like, "What is this? What is this, John?" Like the bit when he's
properly going for it, writhing around on top of him, spotting at imaginary demons.
John Milius is perving on it.
I would have loved it if Peter O'Toole had just turned up in a cameo at that point, going, pollution, demons.
Put the demons off.
Nuclear war.
No demon would take him. Take me, hippos.
But anyway, there's a key phrase that Valeria says, which is, in response to the wizard saying, "The spirits of this place attract a heavy toll," she just says, "I will pay them." So when they eventually bring Conan back and he opens his eyes, she says, what was it? If I were dead and you were still fighting for life, I'd come back from the darkness to fight at your side.
Oh, sad.
That sounds ominous.
That, in the business, we call this foreshadowing. But yeah, so after that, they set off to attack Thorsodoom's Mountain of Power, as they call it.
Which was actually an underground truck factory in Italy.
Yeah, but not before Arnold, they say, "Have you even the strength to lift that sword?" or something. And he does
my favourite scene in the whole film. How did I
forgot that? Yeah. And the significance of the leather bindings around his wrists.
We've developed a theory about that, because that's his training montage where he's getting better. Because he's had nails through his wrists. He's got these sort of leather braces on to sort of steady the joints, I think.
Yeah, they're like compression bandages sort of things.
But to this day, whenever you see a barbarian art in fancy, they've always got these leather braces on.
Is it because they all nailed themselves to trees for 30 days or something?
Well, it must be.
It might be, but you unfortunately see a lot of reenactors who wear them.
Just sit around waiting for a vulture to turn up. Oh, I can't see any vultures here.
Well, it's cheap and a check.
That scene where Conan, you can tell he's just kind of washed all the writing off his face and everything, and he stands there, he takes his sword out and he sort of looks at his hand, moves it around a bit, and as if he's kind of, if even he's unsure as to whether it's still going to do the job. But he takes the sword out and he takes up his stance and does a few swings.
Wangs it around a bit, doesn't he?
Really triumphant music, I seem to remember, that kind of builds as this is happening. And you've got the blue sky in the background, maybe the sea as well, I can't remember.
And he wouldn't have been able to do that if he hadn't slimmed down for the role. He trained with a proper Japanese sword master, didn't he?
Yeah, you can really tell in the film because John Milius.
Is that the one who kicks one of the extras in the nuts when he laughs in one of the scenes?
I wonder if that's him. I'm not sure
that is him.
Is that the actual sword master?
I
don't know. I'd have to look that up. But definitely, there's this weird samurai film thing that they do where they'll cut someone and then just stand still, and the other guy just has blood spurting out of him. But they have to do that sort of pose for about 5 seconds, like, because they're like that over there.
You know what? I'm looking at a picture of that scene now where Arnie's taking up his sword stance
on the beach.
Yeah, like it's just such a striking image. Like you got the blue sky and the sea in the background, and Arnie just there looking completely determined and like an absolute powerhouse of flesh, basically.
It's actually based on a scene from there's a western that Marlon Brando did called I've forgotten what it's called. Something I Jack, 4 I Jack, 2 I Jack, something I Jack.
What?
I don't remember the name, but that was the inspiration because he's like this bandit who gets betrayed and he gets beaten up and goes to prison and he comes back and he decides he's going to get revenge and he's on a beach sort of relearning how to shoot a revolver. So John Milius saw that, was like, that's in the movie. That's a movie for the movie.
Yeah. But yeah, that's such a glorious scene. And then, they set off to attack the Mountain of Power.
Yes, which was it was a huge set, wasn't it? Like a big temple entrance.
It's an underground truck factory.
And they've got all sorts of weird things going on in there. You've got like some kind of labour happening and sort of thralls carrying equipment around, but then you've got like this massive orgy in the middle that's happening when they get into like the inner sanctum sort of place.
But it's the wacky and confusing thing about the film is that there's loads of lore that's not really from the books that John Milius wrote for this film.
But it's still really good.
The whole point is at the bottom of the mountain, all the people who join the cult and they're going up those stairs earlier on, they harvest them and eat them, and that's where they get their magic powers from.
Yeah, because there's that big cauldron in the middle that we have to talk about yesterday.
They called it split pea and hand soup. Because it has hands in it. It's the colour of split peas and it's full of hands.
And it's guarded like all things in fantasy should be by a muscly man with no shirt, but a gimp mask.
Yeah, obviously.
That's how it's done.
I'm amazed he didn't have a big gong to bang.
Oh, God. It is one of my dreams, too. If I owned like a nightclub, I'd love to have a load of bouncers who could do the job. But if there's trouble, I'd bang a gong. And one massive guy would come up from the basement, like, well, bring the gong boy.
The gong boy. Well, Valeria, is it her name? She said the worst thing about that scene, because they had to put on camouflage paint for it.
Oh, yeah.
They used to kind of soap-based paint because they didn't want it to crack, but it actually itched their skin really badly to keep that paint on.
And John Milius told them, like, we've got a hotel, don't worry. And then they got to the hotel and there was no running water, so she had to sleep in it.
Sandal Bergman.
Oh, Sandal. 90% of the film's commentary is just John Milius going, look at Sandal.
She looks really good, though. I'm looking her up on IMDb and she's aged very well.
He says at one point, I saw her a couple of years ago. She looks great. Yeah,
she hasn't changed that much. She was that dancer. She did all that sort of lithe stealthing around the temple. Didn't she?
But it's why. I mean, she was the first choice because she's got those dancing skills. Like, there's a bit in. She did all her own stunts. There's a fight scene where she does sort of a matrix run up a wall and then kicks off it.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Which is a dance move pioneered by James Cagney.
Oh.
If you ever watch
dirty rat.
Everyone remembers him for like gangster films where he just go, I'm going to shoot your ass, eh? But he did
kill my brothers, eh?
And he had this move where he'd like run up a wall and bounce off. We were like, get on the trolley. They loved trams back then. You'd be like, Anyway, this is derailed. The trams like, yes, they are. It's relevant.
Well, the temple scene is like the big finale, isn't it? So Arnold goes in there. Thulsa Doom turns into a snake.
That's not explained either. It's just, it can turn into a snake. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, they got like an animatronic snake machine, and they got a rubber mask of James Earl Jones's face. They just made it morph. It looks really good, yeah.
There's also, I have to mention, my favourite part in that whole fight scene. Sandal Bergman's got to capture like the princess and bring her back, and she fights back, so she just hits her with a decapitated head.
Oh yeah, that was good. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I just love that fight scene though, because they sort of sneak their way into the sanctum, set fire to loads of the curtains and like hanging, I don't know, like veils and stuff they have around the place.
And the spoon man gets decapitated or something like that.
Yeah, I think Subutai kills him. And he sort of taps him on the shoulder, and the guy looks around like, and then he goes, shing, and then
that's when the music starts.
But then it's so great because obviously all the soldiers run in. Conan and friends walk about slaying left, right, and centre, but it's only the combatants. They don't slay the orgy goers, as it were.
I like the details. Every now and again, there's just a horny person that'll push out of the way.
How many people do you think survived the orgy? Just went, well, that was great. I'll definitely come again. It's 5 stars.
A muscly man wearing tiger-striped camouflage came in. He chopped up the gong man and the soup man, but I had a lovely time.
I say that wasn't in the program. There was a surprise.
Do you remember the bit where Conan lifts the cauldron and just flings it down the stairs? I love that because they always put a scene in there that really shows off his strength and makes you think, oh, that must have been quite a lot of effort going into that lift.
Though where one of the units, Sven Ole Thorsten, he just hits a pillar with his giant hammer and it collapses.
I love that because those two guys walk in, and for me, you've got in that moment those two guys Stillman, and they look, and one of them sees Conan and just goes, "You," as in like he's recognised him. It's like, how the fuck is this guy still alive?
What I have to ask though, Stefan, is how upset are you that those two didn't set up a hair metal band?
Oh man, that would have been cool, but still.
Do you like them because they basically look like a Manowar cover?
I think everything about Conan is quite Manowar, to be honest. Like a lot of the Manowar album covers look just like Frank Frazetta's artwork. I don't know if he's maybe he's designed some of their covers. I don't even know. I'll have to research that. But there's definitely Conan imagery in there.
There's a style that comes up over and over again with his characters where you'll just have like a really hench guy and he's standing over a pile of bodies and there's always one woman with a top off just sort of going,
But,
I've got about 20 minutes left of this session, so
right, wrap it up. Basically, they escape and it's very sad. James Earl Jones shoots Valeria with a snake.
Yes, that was very bad, actually.
I have to just mention that fight scene there. So the two big guys against Arnie, that's just great because, like, you've just got the three strongest men in the whole movie sort of wailing on each other with swords and hammers and axes, and then effectively demolishing the building in the process. That's just cool. You got to love it.
Yeah.
But
I just love how it's like a boss fight in a game.
It is. It feels exactly like a boss fight.
I mean, this is before video games really existed, but he kills all like the low-level sort of soup boys, and then after that, he's got to fight two big lads.
Yeah, after he's dealt with the soup boys, you can see
those soup boys.
You can practically see the health bars above them, can't you? Yeah. But yeah, as you say, they escape. Thulsa Doom hits Valeria with an arrow that's made of a straightened out snake.
Of course, that's what happens.
He just whispers into the rigid snake, "Seek," and then it flies off and kills Valeria.
I mean, I do that very often, but I still have no luck.
That's very D&D. Yeah.
And then, of course, they go back to the wizard's place in the ruins, and then they await Thulsa Doom's arrival to come and finish them off. I love how they go around sort of booby-trapping the place as well.
Punji sticks and
like the big bent tusk thing, or the big sharpened bone, or whatever it is that
hinge trap thing. Yeah,
it's kind of hinged there.
John Milius was kind of exercising all his demons from because he was very upset about not being able to go to Vietnam, and it kind of upset him for years. And then in this film, he put in all the Vietnam booby traps that he would have loved to have used on people.
Well, that's where the old man, the wizard, turns up covered in armor with so many swords stuck into his breastplate and just with a whole pole across his shoulders.
And then Arnie and Subutai just ask him, "Where did you get this?" And he says, "From the dead. The gods are pleased. They will watch the battle." And then Arnie says, "Are they going to help?" And he says, "No." "Well, then tell them to stay out of the way." And then they all laugh.
That's very Conan.
I get the feeling that could have been slightly better scripted, but it was good. It was good.
Perfect. There's an I mean, I
He
think
wasn't Groucho Marx, was he?
Well,
No.
I don't think Groucho Marx would have worked this. I'm like, what's going on here?
See, we're going to have a battle. See, the only blood flying around here is going to be blood from the masses in the audience.
Want to hear Groucho Marx interlude of the day? I've learned about this recently. He when he was really wealthy and successful, there was still a bit of prejudice in Hollywood, and he went to this country club, and they said, "I'm very sorry, we just found out you're Jewish, so you're gonna have to leave," which is not very good. His way of dealing with it was like, my daughter's half Jewish. Can she go in the pool up to her waist?
Oh, my dad really loves Groucho Marx quotes. Like, it's
Sorry,
his entire sense of humour. I was kind of brought up on Marx Brothers movies, and Groucho Marx's wit, which didn't really pass over to me, but I do appreciate it.
What would this film be like if he played Conan?
I couldn't bear to be a member of any. I couldn't bear to be in any club that would have me as a member.
That's my dad's favourite quote of all time. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, what have I done?
What have I done? Yeah. But back to the bloody film. It's got my favourite. Sorry.
I was just going to say, at that point, Thulsa Doom and his men roll up.
And what's great is there's no CGI. There's not many of them, like about 20, but it feels epic.
They went through hours and hours of daily horsemanship lessons and stuff, so the riding is really good quality.
It's kind of believable that two warriors that know the terrain and they've set up a load of traps might be able to fend off an attack from 20 guys if they come in on horseback and not really knowing what awaits them.
It's also my favourite part of the film is him praying at the start.
Oh man, I love that scene. He says,
"Oh,
Crom." He's like, "Crom, I have never prayed to you before. I have no tongue for it. Not even you will remember if we were good men or bad, why we fought and why we died. All that matters is two stood against many. That's what's important." And then something else that I can't remember. Then he's like, "Power pleases you, Crom. So if you grant me one thing, grant me revenge. And if you do not listen, then to hell with you."
I love that, mate. He's praying to God and he's just like, "Then to hell with you."
To hell with you.
Sorry, I got carried away.
The whole idea that Conan will ask the gods for help on occasion, but he's quite casual about it and says, like, you know, if you're not going to help, then fuck you, essentially. I'll do it myself.
Very similar to Matt's obsession from a few years ago with Arnold Schwarzenegger just saying "fuck you" to people. To have like, fuck you. I'll sue you.
I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger groped me. Yes, so what? I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. Fuck you.
He's been a bit bad in his lifetime sometimes.
Yes,
there's a lot of accusations. I've not read much into them, but
so what? Fuck you. I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's just mad that he had an affair with like the family maid for years. This woman who sort of lived next door, basically, in the same bed that he slept with his wife.
So what? I give a more in a month than I give you, then you make in a year, asshole. Get out of here.
God, I mean, did his wife not notice that like the sheets got changed every day? Did she just think like, "Oh, Maria's thorough"? I mean, what was going on?
He's not in the same world as us, is he? He's really poles apart.
He's doing well during the current crisis. Have you seen his videos? There's one where he just goes like, "Stay home, don't be a jackass," and it turns out he lives with a tiny donkey.
Yeah, and that weird guy, when he appeared in public, tried to double front kick him in the back and just bounced off.
Yeah, some guy did like a Captain Kirk drop kick.
Of all the people to try and drop kick, he has to drop kick the Terminator, Conan the Barbarian himself.
He didn't really notice, did he?
No, it just bounced off his back, and Arnold kept his perfect upright posture as well.
Oh, bless him.
Yeah, the ending of Conan.
Killed Bradley Bill. He kills everyone.
There's a great fight. Subutai shoots a few arrows.
Kills the units, doesn't he?
Conan sticks are sharpened sticks. There's a horse that fell down the hill.
Yeah,
which caused a controversy.
Yeah. Conan fights both of the henchmen one-on-one, and he gets one of them with the elaborate booby trap they set up, and then he has his final fight with the one that isn't Thorgrim. I've forgotten his name.
Mr. Big Man.
Yeah, the guy in the leather jacket.
Bugger.
So he has a big fight with Leather Jacket Man, and then just as it looks like he's got the better of Conan and he's about to deliver the death blow, Valeria turns up in this shimmering scale armor and parries his strike. He looks really surprised, and then she blinds him with a swing. So it's like she can't really do damage, but she can sort of stun him, as it were. And then she just turns to Conan and says the immortal words, "Do you want to live forever?" And then at that, Conan takes up his sword, has his final fight with what's his name, breaks his father's sword that the guy stole from him years ago.
That's
the
surprising.
one that was cast.
Because at the start of the film, it's all about that sword, like, the visual of the steel, this you can trust. And then at the end, he just smashes through it, like, fuck you.
What I like, though, is that kind of Thulsa Doom's words, in one sense, kind of ring true at the end. And he tells Conan the riddle of steel. He says, "Do you want to know the answer? Steel isn't strong, flesh is stronger." And then Arnie kind of proves that by shattering the sword, which is
he goes back to sort him out. And he's still got his father's sword, and he just chops into his neck with it. So steel is stronger than his flesh.
And that's
I like that inversion.
Honestly, they practiced that stunt a lot, but it was a genuine. They put a kind of padded plate over,
like a big leather collar,
neck, and so Arnie could actually twat in the neck with it.
With some force,
that there's this big build-up where James Earl Jones is like, "Oh, you're like me. I've made you. You're my son." And
what are you going to do now?
I am the wellspring from which you flow.
Yeah, because I thought the first time I saw it, I thought it might almost be like a cliffhanger, like, you'll be my successor. And then he just stabs him in the neck, like, fuck you!
I love that, because Conan starts to look a bit confused, like he's buying it, and then he just kind of snaps out of it. Knocks his head off. But there's something I love about that, the imagery of that at the very end, where Conan's stood there in his final confrontation. All of the cult are watching up the steps of the place where they like arrested him ages ago, and Arnie just like grabs Thulsa Doom by the hair, chops off his head, and then holds the severed head out above the crowd. Like, here's your false prophet, and then throws him down the stairs.
Glorious. It's really well structured.
What I was disappointed in was the head sort of veers off to the right and vaguely ends up amongst some braziers down there. I wanted it to go all the way to the bottom, like a slinky, but a slinky...
I think it looks more realistic.
You know, when the slinky is going down the stairs and suddenly stops and everybody goes, "Oh," and somebody nudges it and it keeps on going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You couldn't have been a Tudor executioner, though, Matt, because he's too much of a perfectionist. You'd shot Anne Boleyn, be like, we'll have to get another one. That wasn't right.
But seriously, think about it. Sorry, I was just going to say that scene where you've got Arnie stood there holding a severed head out to the crowd in one hand and a broken sword in the other, and on these steps that are all very ornate and there's fires burning everywhere, that is Conan artwork right there, and they've managed to capture it.
It's very much an idea that that cult are nearly ready to follow him, and he just walks off like, nah.
Oh, that's when he gets that weird sort of chained up brazier and hurls it over his head, doesn't he, to destroy the temple?
Like a hammer toss, yeah.
Yeah, he tosses it into a stone temple, which miraculously sets ablaze.
Catches fire.
But the power of Arnie.
Was it John Milius or someone else that said up to that point, Conan was only really focused on his revenge, but he becomes a proper hero by taking the higher path and sort of destroying the temple as well.
It's such a shame because, Oliver Stone wanted it to be like Bond because Conan was basically short stories. This was before, when it started, it was before fantasy novels. It was always in magazines. So he wanted it to be like Bond, where you get a film every 2 years. But John Milius thought he would have 3 films, one where Conan starts, another one where he becomes the king, and the third one would be dealing with being the king. So this first film is just Conan becoming Conan, but the studio bloody took it off him, because that cunts! Which is a real shame.
Calm down, Simon, calm down.
But yeah, he talked about in the commentary this idea that once he's done that, he's like a blank slate. He can be whoever he wants because he's had his revenge.
I guess, yeah.
But one thing I love is, when you think about the structure of the film, it opens with James Earl Jones using that sword to chop his mum's head off. And then at the end, he's saying, "I'm your father, really, because I made you."
I'm glad you mentioned
his head off with the same sword.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it shows again Thulsa Doom cutting off his mum's head. But the way that he did that was a full stylized, I'm going to turn my back on you, then swing around and then lop off her head.
He sort of hypnotized her with his snake powers.
Yeah, it was a full-on stylized spin and backswing. Yeah.
It was really well done, though, because the only time that you see Thulsa Doom's kind of army is at the start where they're all armoured up and on the horses. And there's that music playing, like,
well, he's got such gravity, hasn't he? And he fixes you with his eyes. Though he was wearing those blue contacts.
Yeah, that is
a straight wig.
It's why he's got the worst haircut in the world. That sort of long, straight wig with a tiny, tiny sort of Betty Page fringe. But the idea behind that is he's meant to look like no other ethnicity in the world because he's the only Atlantean. So
I love that.
Wacky.
And he's 1,000 years old, yeah.
There's also, like, this is bloody English literature time, like, Conan's the only one of his people left. He's not in the stories, there's loads of them.
Yeah.
But in this film, he's the only Cimmerian left. And he's fighting the only Atlantean.
They seem to have a real skill with steel.
I don't know what that's all about.
I don't know, really. I think it seems like Conan kind of takes to his swordsmanship straight away, more or less. But having said that, he does get trained with all sorts of weapons by the gladiators, doesn't he? So,
and he uses those punching gloves, doesn't he?
Is it in this version where Thulsa Doom says they don't worship our gods, this is what they worship, the sword, or something? Or is that another version? I can't remember.
I don't know. I don't remember that line from the movie.
It might be in the remake.
It might be Conan the Destroyer, which is disappointingly shit.
I think my mum likes that one. I don't know.
The thing is, I actually saw Conan the Destroyer first and liked it. Back when on Channel 5, you would have an action movie on a Friday and then an erotic thriller after.
Hey, what, on Channel 5?
Oh, them wit days. That was a good...
Them wit days.
Before the pornography, back when there was dial-up and you didn't have a naughty little phone. Back in those days, you had 8 p.m, guaranteed documentary about Nazis and tanks. 9 p.m, there's an action movie. 11 p.m, parents have gone to bed. Erotic thriller.
Cue the soft porn.
They always had to have a vague plot so they didn't count as porn. And you wouldn't see downstairs. You'd only see boob. But if you were like 12, that was enough.
That was
just
wait a minute.
World on fire.
Are you telling me that Conan the Barbarian doesn't tick all of those boxes?
It did. Yeah, I think it was. I remember there was a review that came out, and it was just this film was designed for 13-year-old boys who were sex obsessed, which isn't fair because there's more to the film than that. But I think I saw it at about 13. I was like,
was the big American football player henchman guy called Louis Barbu?
That's an amazing name. Can you imagine a crowd just going Barbu?
Barbu.
Well, he just lays into people with his giant impractical axe.
The Japanese swordmaster was called Kiyoshi Yamasaki.
Yeah, he did a lot of samurai films, apparently.
Yeah.
So I
think we've kind of got through it, haven't we?
I think we've run out of Conaniness.
Well, I had such an experience watching this because it had been years since I'd seen it. I'm not as familiar with it as you two fellas.
I think I've got one more thing to mention, which is we said about Conan the Destroyer being the sequel. There were plans for a third Conan movie a while ago, but they never seemed to come to light, really. But
such a shame.
There is an unofficial sort of third Arnie as Conan kind of movie, which is called Red Sonja. And it's got Arnie dressed very similarly to how he dresses in Conan, with a similar sword. And his name's Kaldor, I think. I think it was Kaldor.
I could never remember his name. In my mind, he's like, I'm Barry.
Yeah, we should probably do that as well.
I think it's Kaldor.
General Trevor.
And the female character is the hero, so Arnie's more of a secondary protagonist. And you know who plays the female villain of the movie?
Yes.
Who is it, Simon?
Sandal Bloody Bergman.
Yeah, it's
you're right. Yeah,
it's Valeria from Conan the Barbarian.
I haven't seen that in years either, so we should probably give that a try.
Yeah,
she wasn't in a lot of films, but she made an impression.
She did.
If there are any friends of the show as well, once we put this up on YouTube and whatever other medium, if you do want to write us a comment with any other suggestions of sword and fantasy films, That would be very well
there's
received.
some. There's Frank Frazetta's film Fire and Ice, which I watched today, and it is ridiculous. There's
Put it on the
every
list.
character is in their underwear all the time, and there's a bit where they're on a glacier fighting,
What's
and
the
no
one
one
with
seems bothered.
What's the one with Sean Connery in hot pants or
Oh,
whatever?
Zardoz. We should watch Zardoz.
Zardos.
The gun is good. The penis is evil.
Zardos sounds like a vaguely Greek holiday destination.
Oh, that was a ridiculous film. Apparently, Sean Connery would get drunk and write poetry, and he'd phone up the director with it. Like, I've written some poetry.
You have to listen to this. I've written some good shit.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Fuck you!
I've turned my trailer upside down. I don't know how that happened.
Like I was Robbie Coltrane. One last bloody bit of Sandal Bergman trivia.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
one. What? Hey, he's gone. There's one last bit of Sandal Bergman trivia. During the last fight that she was in, where they're running through these caves, she sort of bounces off a wall and stabs a stuntman in the throat. He drops to the floor, gasping for air. And John Milius said, like, that guy was very badly injured.
And then John Milius goes, "That's movie making, that is.
That's a movie.
You're a fucking movie star."
And then he smoked another cigar. Because all roads lead to Oliver Reed.
Yeah.
There's a film. There were loads of rip-offs throughout the 80s of Conan the Barbarian because they wanted to capture that success. But it was lightning in the bottle. No one really got it. Oliver Reed's in a similar film just called Gore. G-O-R, just Gore.
Wait, Oliver Reed's in it, you said?
Yeah, well,
by
the late 80s, no one would hire him apart from Saddam Hussein because he was such a liability.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Oh, Oliver Reed, he pushed his best friend off a balcony.
He broke his
back.
back.
A bad man. What?
A bad man. He broke his back. Man. But on that note, anybody got any other points to add? Any other business?
Oh, in the spirit of Mr. Motivated, don't stab people. You probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Don't put people into soup and then pour the soup on a lot of people having an orgy.
Don't eat hands.
Should we have a list of do's and don'ts, basically?
To be fair, if you were going to pour something on an orgy, at least gazpacho isn't going to hurt anyone.
Gazpacho, Simon.
Yeah, gazpacho all over the orgy.
Just don't mix it with Chardonnay.
No.
Do remember that if you want to get forward in life, you just have to kill loads of people.
Crush your enemies.
Or just crush your enemies.
See
women.
Push a big wheel for like 20 years and you'll get
Actually, you know that wheel was well made because they made it for the set. It was so well greased and balanced that it was really easy to push. So it's like Arnie gave it a shove and all the other extras around the wheel got sent flying because he just shoved this wheel and he had to make it look harder to push. So they had a load of other people out of shot on the wheel pushing against Arnie, so he had to actually struggle.
No way, that's amazing.
Yeah, because it was just so perfectly made. It was just on a nicely lubricated bearing, so it just span.
Yeah.
He's not going to talk more about his gladiator days because they're absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, he killed loads of people, but most of his weapons seem to be spiked fists.
Well, every fight's like a level in a video game. Like, you've got to fight Bitey Man.
And after the fight, he would always do that crossed arms pose.
Which he does at the end of the film.
Does he?
Yeah, he's got Thulsa Doom's head, and he's got the sword, and he does his little gladiator bow. Like, he doesn't make that noise.
No. It's not with Thulsa Doom's head. It's after he smashed the sword. And he's...
that's
where he does it.
I didn't realise. I never picked up on that, yeah.
It's the same as, like, the film starts with Thulsa Doom's boys riding into his village. Yeah. And there's a track on the soundtrack called The Riders of Doom. Yeah. And that comes back right at the end, the exact same music when they're riding to fight him, but he's all grown up and muscular.
It does actually.
Cool. He's bigger than them.
You've raised a good point there. I'm probably like waffling on a bit now, but it is interesting how they use that same part of the soundtrack, and it's once again the same riders coming for him when they came for his village.
Yeah,
it's almost the same scene repeating itself, but this time Conan's ready.
Because when you see an interview with John Milius, like, who's this fucking guy? Like, he's got a cigar and he's like, I like to get a 45 out on people for no reason. Like, who's this guy? But he this film's actually very well thought through and structured, and he loves it.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
It's one hell of a film.
Yeah, one hell of a film. I'm very happy with it. I might watch it again.
We can have one last Milius trivia, or we're done.
One last, yeah.
Come on.
He wrote Apocalypse Now. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Really?
Yeah, well, it was all about, I wish I'd been to Vietnam. I need to get Vietnam anecdotes off people. And like with Oliver Stone, he'd ask about Vietnam. They'd be like, leave me alone. Tell me about Vietnam. But he found out the main actor, Martin Sheen, is scared of guns and he hates them. So, there's a lot of narration in the film when he sounds really sort of uncomfortable. Like, we went up the river. I nearly said Oliver Reed because it's an example of someone being mean. He did his famous routine where he'd get his 1911 out, which he loves. He'd cock it and say, "What up the spout? It's fully loaded." And he'd put it in Martin Sheen's hand and made him hold this loaded pistol while he read his lines.
Oh, God.
So if you watch the film, he's like, "Oh, I was losing my mind," because he was really nervous.
Oh, God.
It's a miracle that there were never any gun accidents around that man. I think there were. There must have been some. He probably shot an extra. Who knows?
Right.
Yeah, that was a tangent. But anyway, shall we close this by making Arnold noises?
Yes, please. Do you want to go first, or shall we all go together?
I think we should all go together.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
No!
Get to the snake
Finish the
chopper.
episode. Press the stop button.
The bot is still recording.
Those Gringotts goblins are funding the IRA.
I'm not in the hypocrite, Harry. Harry.
Oh, what if there was a remake where he was Dumbledore?
Jesus
Nitwit
Christ.
order Bloodman tweak. House of made tea again, Harry.
All right, thanks for listening.
What if 50-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger played Hermione and no one ever referred
All
to
right,
it?
thanks for listening.